This is going to be a quick video on flashing and installing a new BIOS chip onto the video card, 7000 Radeon in this case, but would be the same 9200, 8500, whatever. Computer, motherboard. In this case, that chip right there is the CMOS, the BIOS that has all of the data that this card is going to send to the computer. Computer is going to poll and ask questions. If that doesn't have the right software on it, PC card won't work in the Mac. So I'm going to show you how to flash that guy. This is a programmer. You can put the card into a computer and try to flash that way, but if you don't have a PC with PCI slot or AGP slot, whatever card you got, or if your Mac can't read it to begin with, this is just a much easier way to do it, in my opinion. So you have a couple different types of chips. They will be labeled on these programmers. You can find these guys online. They're like $10. 25X and 24X. These CMOS chips are going to be 25. EPROMs, they're 24. Don't worry about that right now. But they come with these guys. Little headers. You can drop them in. Red is pin 1, which is always going to be towards the handle here. So you drop them in to match that guy there, and the further back is your pin 1 on the 24, on the 25 rather. 24 is up front. So that guy right there is hooked up for a CMOS chip. These are the chips. If this is soldered onto the board, you can use this clip. The clip will go right on. If this will focus, there you go. You can see, so hard to focus things. You'll be able to see that it just touches the contacts on that chip. And because it's able to grab onto the top of those contacts, there, you can read and write to it without desoldering it from the board. I'll show you a little bit later here about soldering, but they come in a pack like this if you need a new one or a bigger one, such as the 8500 PC edition. A lot of them are only 64K. These chips here are 1 meg. They don't make the 128 meg ones that are in the old update guide. The chip that's right here is this guy right here. So there is the model number for a currently in production chip that will work on any card. Doesn't really matter, as long as it's got the 2500 and a nominal voltage of 2.7 to 3.6, which this card does. So you'll take this guy and we will plug it in here to a USB, and then you're going to be able to open up a program, which I'll provide a link to here, which is just a programmer, a hex programmer. That's all it is. It'll auto-detect a chip, and you can see right there it knows what the chip is. Right now it's just showing blank data, but I'm going to read from this chip, and because it's a new chip, it's mostly blank. Not a whole lot there. But if you go to open and you download a driver, not a driver, I'm sorry, a ROM. So here's the MAC-K bin binary. That's what bin stands for. Open it up, and now you can see in this program the data that you're going to be writing to that chip. And you can just hit program, and on it'll go. And there you go. You're done. Always click verify after the fact to make sure it actually wrote correctly without any errors. But this chip now is a Macintosh 7000 BIOS chip. As simple as that. So we're going to take this guy, and I'm going to show you soldering here in a minute. I unfortunately don't have a tripod or anything like that to stick this camera on, but I just wanted to show you. If you get a bunch of solder onto a chip, or you come to it where the chip's already on and it's just globbed up, you want to make sure all your pads are cleaned. So you can heat them. Just like that, it melts. Standard 25 watt, not even 15 watt soldering iron. And you can use this stuff here, solder braid, or just some random old wire. But to clean it, you stick it over the solder, press down, and the solder or the wire, the wire or the solder braid is going to wick all of that up into that braid lattice and clean off your chip. If you are removing an old chip, odds are the solder is going to be kind of rough on there, 20 plus years old. So don't be afraid to add a little bit of new solder onto the contacts to pull the chip off. And when you're doing that, just run your iron all the way across. So you heat all of it up, and then you can pick up one side and pick up the other side. You want to make sure that the solder is liquid before you lift, because the little shiny bits here that you see, these little gold plates, they're called pads. If you pull on one of them and the solder's not molten, it'll rip that pad off, and the veer, the little trace underneath it that leads to the rest of the circuit board, will get damaged. And then you got to jumper wires and figure out where the circuit went, and it just don't do it. Just make sure it's liquid and it can move around, and then pick it off. You can also use a hot air soldering station, which I have, but you probably don't, so I'm not going to bother showing that right now. On your chip, there's going to be a tiny little dot. Be hard to see, but it'll be somewhat reflective on there. That's pin 1. The little circle on the chip always designates or denotes pin 1. So you can get your chip ready to go on. You want a little bit of solder on each one of your pads, which I already have. But I'll show you here. You can take a little bit of solder on the tip of your iron and then just dab your iron where you want the solder. Not a lot, just a smidgen. And that'll be enough for you to take your chip, line up pin 1, drop it down on your board. This is where you can use a flux paste if you want. I personally prefer this liquid stuff. Drop a little bit of that down all over the board where you're going to be soldering. Flux is one of those things that's kind of required. If you don't have it, you're going to run into some problems. The flux allows for impurities to be carried away from your weld pool, basically. Here it's solder. But without it, you're not going to get good contact. That's a bit too much solder on the tip. Touch the down, and boom, pin 1 is soldered. And then you can just a little bit and a little bit, 2 done, 3 done, 4 done, and come back over on the other side, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then what you can do with a wire or a solder braid, just run your iron along it to clean that off, and your soldering iron is going to pick up solder. So you can just dab it and pull off the excess if you have any, which I did because I didn't really prepare all that much for this. And there you go. That is a soldered chip onto a board, and that's all it takes. To desolder it, you can use a pair of pliers or such. In my case, I have a pair of ESD pliers. And you get that guy warm on one side, warm on the other side, and she will come off. I unfortunately don't have a third hand, and I don't have this bolted down at all, so it's kind of difficult. But it will work, just like that. Oof. There she be. So that's how you do it. You can swap out as many BIOSes as you'll want. Flash different versions of them. Take your pick. But if you need to replace it with a larger chip, something that can handle a full BIOS rather than one of them reduced versions, it's as simple as that. These chips are like 40 cents. This is $10. You can probably even find it for less. And that's it. You're off to the races.